Why do some Irish people have jet black hair, dark eyes, and olive skin, when most Irish are famously fair-skinned and red-haired? For centuries, these black Irish have sparked wild theories about Spanish shipwrecks, Moorish sailors, and hidden African ancestry. Modern DNA testing is finally revealing the shocking truth about their origins, and it's not what anyone expected. Walk through any Irish town, and you'll notice something peculiar. Amid the pale, freckled, red-haired population that defines Irish stereotypes, you'll encounter people who look remarkably different. They have dark brown or black hair, brown or hazel eyes, and skin that tans easily rather than burning. Their features are distinctly Celtic, unmistakably Irish, yet their coloring seems imported from Mediterranean shores. These are the Black Irish, and their existence has puzzled observers for centuries. The term itself is loaded with mystery. Some use it simply to describe dark-haired Irish people. Others claim it marks a distinct ethnic subgroup with foreign origins. Still others insist it's purely mythological, a romantic invention with no biological basis. In 2010, researchers at Trinity College Dublin launched the most comprehensive genetic study of Irish populations ever conducted. Dr. Daniel Bradley and his team analyzed DNA from thousands of Irish volunteers, mapping genetic variation across the island. They expected to find relatively uniform Celtic genetics with minor regional differences. What they discovered instead forced a complete reconsideration of Irish genetic history. The Black Irish, those with the distinctive dark coloring, showed genetic signatures that set them apart from other Irish populations. But the source of this distinctiveness wasn't what folklore suggested. The truth was simultaneously more ancient and more complex than tales of Spanish sailors or Moorish princes. The most popular explanation for the Black Irish involves the Spanish Armada of 1588. According to this romantic tale, after the Armada's defeat by England, Spanish ships fleeing northward wrecked along Ireland's western coast. Thousands of Spanish sailors supposedly swam ashore, settled in Irish communities, married Irish women, and fathered dark-haired, dark-eyed children whose descendants became the Black Irish. It's a compelling story, repeated in countless books and websites. Some versions add Moorish or North African sailors among the Spanish crews, explaining the darkest coloring among Black Irish individuals. The tale has everything: maritime disaster, exotic foreigners, forbidden romance, and genetic legacy. But modern genetics demolishes this legend. DNA studies of Irish populations, including those from western coastal regions where Armada wrecks occurred, show virtually no Spanish genetic input. Y chromosome analysis, which traces paternal lineages, reveals no spike in Iberian haplogroups in Western Ireland. If thousands of Spanish men had fathered children there, we'd see clear genetic evidence. We don't. Dr. Gianpiero Cavalieri at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland conducted specific research on this question. His team analyzed populations from counties Clare, Galway, and Mayo, the primary Armada wreck sites. They found Spanish genetic markers at less than 2%, no higher than in Eastern Ireland, which had no Armada contact. The romantic legend is genetically false. Historical records support genetics. While some Armada sailors did reach Irish shores, most were killed by English forces or died from exposure and starvation. Those who survived were either executed or ransomed back to Spain. Very few settled permanently. Their genetic contribution to Ireland's population would have been statistically negligible. If the Spanish Armada didn't create the Black Irish, what did? The answer requires traveling back not 400 years, but 4,000 years, to the Neolithic period when Ireland was first settled by farmers from continental Europe. Around 4000 BC, agricultural peoples from Iberia, modern Spain and Portugal, began migrating northward along the Atlantic coast. These Neolithic farmers brought revolutionary technologies, domesticated crops, livestock, pottery, and polished stone tools. They also brought their genes. When they reached Ireland around 3800 BC, they encountered a small population of Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. What happened next was dramatic. Genetic studies analyzing ancient Irish DNA reveal that within just a few centuries, the Neolithic farmers almost completely replaced the hunter-gatherer population. This wasn't peaceful coexistence, but demographic replacement, possibly through superior numbers, disease, or conflict. These Neolithic farmers from Iberia are the true Spanish connection to Irish genetics. Modern Irish people inherit approximately 60 to 70% of their ancestry from these ancient agriculturalists. They were the genetic foundation of the Irish population, far more significant than any shipwrecked sailors 4,000 years later. But here's where it gets interesting for the Black Irish question. These Neolithic Iberians weren't all genetically identical. scale. Populations in different parts of Iberia showed variation in pigmentation genes. Some carried variants for lighter skin and hair, others carried variants for darker coloring. When they mixed in Ireland over thousands of years, these variants recombined in different ways in different families. Modern genetic studies have identified specific variants affecting hair and eye color that appear at different frequencies across Irish populations. The genes MC1R, OCA2, and HERC2 show variation that traces back to the original Neolithic settlers. Some Irish families inherited more of the lighter pigmentation variants. Others inherited more darker pigmentation variants. Around 500 BC, Celtic culture and language arrived in Ireland, probably through trade and cultural exchange rather than mass migration. Genetic studies show the Celtic arrival added a new but relatively small genetic component to Irish populations, perhaps 10 to 20% of modern Irish ancestry. The Celtic contribution included some individuals from continental Europe with darker coloring. Celtic populations weren't uniformly pale. This added more pigmentation diversity to the Irish gene pool. Viking raids and settlements beginning in the late 8th century AD brought another genetic influence. Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Cork, and Limerick were all founded as Viking trading posts. Norse settlers mixed with Irish populations, particularly in coastal regions. Contrary to stereotype, not all Vikings were blonde. Scandinavian populations included dark-haired individuals, particularly those from Denmark and southern Norway. Genetic studies of Viking Age remains show significant diversity in pigmentation genes. Irish populations in former Viking settlement areas show 5 to 20% Scandinavian ancestry. Some of this Norse genetic input included darker pigmentation variants. A person with Irish, Neolithic, Celtic, and Viking ancestry might inherit a combination of genes producing black hair and brown eyes, while remaining genetically predominantly Irish. Understanding the genetic basis of Black Irish coloring requires understanding how pigmentation genes work. Hair, eye, and skin color are polygenic traits, controlled by multiple genes interacting in complex ways. The major genes involved include MC1R for red hair, OCA2 and HERC2 for eye color, and SLC24A5 for skin color. Irish populations carry variants of all these genes, inherited from multiple ancestral sources over thousands of years. Some variants produce red hair and pale skin. Others produce brown or black hair and darker skin. Most Irish people inherit a mix, producing the medium brown hair and blue or green eyes common in Ireland. But occasionally, someone inherits a combination of variants that produces the classic Black Irish appearance: black or very dark brown hair, brown or dark hazel eyes, and skin that tans rather than burns. This isn't foreign ancestry expressing itself. It's the same ancient Irish genetic diversity recombining in a particular way. Dr. Daniel Bradley's research identified that Black Irish individuals don't form a genetically distinct cluster. They're not a separate ethnic group or the product of recent foreign admixture. They're simply Irish people who inherited a particular combination of pigmentation alleles that exist throughout the Irish population. This explains why Black Irish appearance can run in families, but also appear unpredictably. Two fair-skinned, light-haired parents carrying recessive dark pigmentation variants can have a Black Irish child. Conversely, two Black Irish parents might have fair-skinned children if both carry recessive light pigmentation variants. Some versions of Black Irish mythology claim African or Moorish ancestry, suggesting that North African sailors or slaves introduced dark coloring. This theory has no genetic support whatsoever. Extensive DNA studies of Irish populations show virtually no sub-Saharan African ancestry and minimal North African ancestry. African genetic markers appear in Irish populations at frequencies below 0.5%, consistent with very recent immigration rather than historical admixture. If African ancestry contributed to Black Irish coloring, we'd see much higher frequencies. Similarly, North African genetic signatures appear at negligible levels. The Moorish ancestry theory is contradicted by the lack of North African genetic markers in Irish populations. The Moors conquered Iberia but never reached Ireland, and genetic evidence shows no significant Moorish contribution to Irish ancestry. The confusion arises because people equate dark coloring with recent African ancestry, but dark hair and eyes are ancient in European populations, present since Neolithic times. They don't require African admixture to explain. The Black Irish look the way they do because of European genetic variation, not hidden African ancestry. Black Irish phenotypes show some geographic concentration. Researchers have noted that dark-haired, dark-eyed individuals appear more frequently in Western and Southwestern Ireland, particularly counties Kerry, Cork, Galway, and Clare. Genetic analysis suggests these western regions maintained larger populations during historical famines and epidemics. They also experienced less demographic disruption than Eastern Ireland, which saw more English and Scottish Protestant settlement during the plantation period. This relative isolation allowed Western Irish populations to retain more Neolithic and Celtic genetic diversity without dilution from British genetic input. Since dark pigmentation variants were part of that ancient diversity, they appear more frequently where that diversity was best preserved. Consumer DNA testing has allowed thousands of Irish people to explore their ancestry. Results consistently show that self-identified Black Irish individuals have genetic ancestry indistinguishable from other Irish people. Their ancestry is typically 70 to 80% Irish, 10 to 20% British, and small percentages from Scandinavia and France. Significantly, Black Irish individuals don't show elevated Spanish, North African, or African ancestry compared to fair-skinned Irish people. This definitively disproves theories linking Black Irish appearance to Armada survivors or Moorish ancestry. The coloring comes from ancient European genetic variation, not recent exotic admixture. One interesting finding is that some Black Irish individuals have slightly elevated Neolithic farmer ancestry compared to average Irish populations. This makes genetic sense. If darker pigmentation variants came primarily from Neolithic Iberians, individuals who inherited more Neolithic ancestry might be more likely to also inherit darker coloring. Despite genetic evidence debunking exotic origin theories, the myths surrounding Black Irish ancestry persist. Part of the answer lies in human psychology. We find exotic explanations more interesting than mundane ones. A family story about a Spanish sailor ancestor is more romantic than the truth. Your dark-haired great-grandmother simply inherited a particular combination of ancient Irish genes. The myths also served social functions. In a culture that sometimes faced English prejudice, claiming Spanish or even Moorish ancestry could be a way of asserting sophistication and continental connections. Additionally, the myths reflected real Irish experiences with foreigners. Spanish and French ships did visit Ireland. Norman and Viking settlements were real. The dark secret behind Black Irish DNA is that there is no secret. No hidden Spanish blood, no African ancestry, no mysterious foreign origins. The truth is simpler and more profound. Irish genetics are naturally diverse and have been for thousands of years. The Black Irish represent one expression of that ancient diversity, a combination of genes that produces dark coloring from entirely European, entirely Irish sources. Ireland's genetic story involves Neolithic farmers from Iberia, Celtic migrations, Viking raids, Norman conquests, and thousands of years of evolution. Each wave added to Irish genetic diversity, creating a population that includes red-haired, fair-skinned individuals, Black Irish with dark coloring, and everything in between. The Black Irish are not Spanish, not African, not Moorish. They're Irish as any red-haired, blue-eyed person from Dublin or Belfast. Their dark coloring comes from thousands of years of genetic inheritance on the Emerald Isle. That's the truth, and it's more interesting than any shipwreck story.